My mother-in-law DNA tested our daughter and told my husband she isn't his. I'm a 45-year-old female. My husband, a 48-year-old male, and I have been together for 25 years. We have 3 kids, an 8-year-old, a 15-year-old male, and a 17-year-old female. My husband and I had a lot of trouble conceiving our daughter. We went through several years with no luck and had seen a fertility doctor who had prescribed some medication to help with ovulation. We couldn't afford IVF, so we were going to try this last thing and then look into adoption. Well, long story short, I was assaulted during a burglary while my husband was out with his brother. It was right when I was ovulating. At the hospital, I took emergency contraception even though I knew it would undo all the hard work and mean we wouldn't be able to have a baby of our own, but I couldn't risk getting pregnant with my autistic baby. Well, after a few months, I've been feeling off, sick, and down. I figured I was just depressed after the assault and I hadn't been eating, but I soon found out I was pregnant. We were so excited until I went to my appointment and found out I was 15 weeks instead of the 5-6 weeks I thought I was. I had been having really irregular spotting and bleeding since the emergency contraception, so didn't even imagine I was that far along. My husband and I were devastated because that meant there was so much uncertainty surrounding paternity. We had our ultrasound, and as soon as we saw the baby on the screen, I knew I couldn't have an abortion, and my husband didn't want to either. We talked and went back and forth about adoption and if the baby didn't end up being his or what we would do, and he said he didn't care about paternity, we just wouldn't find out. We decided to wait until our child was older to tell them and they could decide if they wanted to find out themselves. I will also note at this point my case was unsolved but had been linked to other rape and murders at the time. A few years ago my rapist was caught and a year ago finally sentenced. At the hearing, I spoke and my daughter and son knew about it, but I didn't go into details. But they knew I was attacked, but only knew it was before they were born. Last Christmas, my mother-in-law bought my daughter and only my daughter a 23andMe for Christmas. I thought it was extremely weird but didn't think too much of it. Thinking back, I don't know why I didn't see it for what it was. My daughter was equally confused and asked if I wanted to do it instead. I'm adopted. I said sure and just gave my daughter an Amazon gift card for the price of the test. My daughter brought it to my attention that my mother-in-law has been overly critical of my daughter in the last few months, commenting on her differences, saying things like, "I wonder where those eyes came from, hair, height." She even said to my daughter, "I wonder why you're so skinny." My daughter looks exactly like me, the same eyes color, same hair color and texture, but she is quite a bit taller than me. I'm 58, she's 6 feet. I'm on the heavier side, so is my husband, and my daughter is extremely thin, but she is also an athlete. I've never had any reason to believe from looks alone that she is not my husband's daughter. After my daughter brought it to my attention how my mother-in-law was acting, I spoke with her and she said, "Oh, she's just being sensitive." This was a couple of months ago. A couple of nights ago, my mother-in-law invited my husband and I out for dinner and told us to leave the kids at home because she had something important to discuss with us. We did. We went to a restaurant. We were eating and my mother-in-law hands me and my husband 2 separate envelopes. My husband and I both look in the envelope and they are a DNA comparison results. I asked my mother-in-law what it was and she said, "The proof that you're the garbage I always knew you were." I was extremely confused. I asked whose DNA she compared, and as I said that I just knew, she said my husband and my daughter. My husband looked at me and he looked so hurt and lost. I'll never get that image out of my head as long as I live. I called her a heartless C&T, and my husband and I left. I blocked her number from mine and my kids' phones, but figured my husband needed to make that decision on his own. My husband told me last night my mother-in-law called him and he stopped by after work at her house. She was telling my husband she's known for a while and suspected for a very long time and that she wasn't sure how to approach the topic with him. My husband asked how she knew that. She said she overheard my brother-in-law talking to his wife and heard our daughter may not be his. My mother-in-law took that to mean that I cheated, so she did a DNA test. Last year around the hearing, my husband got drunk and ended up mentioning the hearing and some details to my brother-in-law. Apparently, that night while sleeping he said I couldn't protect her and what if she's not mine. My husband was extremely drunk and did not remember doing this. My mother-in-law does not know that I was sad, but she does know there was a break-in and I was attacked. She kept trying to convince my husband to leave me. My husband told her what she did was unforgivable and that he is going to cut her off. My husband is inconsolable. He's so upset he told his mother to fuck off, and then told her that my attack was actually inside, and that's who our daughter's biological father. It still makes me sick to say that she tried to apologize, but my husband told her he can't forgive her and not to contact any of us. I told everyone my mother-in-law DNA tested our daughter and we were done with her. I have 7 siblings and 5 think I'm in the right. The other two and my brother-in-law can't believe my mother-in-law did that but understands why, because she didn't have the entire story and assumed I wasn't being truthful to my husband. But even if I wasn't, I can't imagine being a parent so concerned with my child's relationship that I would go to those lengths to meddle. Update 1. Mother-in-law DNA tested my daughter without our consent and proved she isn't my husband's. First, thank you for all your support and a big fuck off to all the creeps and assholes. To answer the most common questions. Yes, we have no contact with my mother-in-law. I haven't talked to her since the dinner and my husband hasn't spoken to her since a couple days after that. She knows I was raped and attempted to apologize to my husband when he last spoke to her, but he basically told her to fuck off. And he couldn't forgive her. We also had a good relationship up until this point, or so I thought. We hung out and did stuff together. I was just really hurtful that she told me at dinner when I asked what the envelope was, that it's proof that you're the trash I always knew you were. Also, my answers and descriptions of what took place are intentionally vague, due to the amount of attention this got, and the fact someone commented this is now on TikTok. I don't want a single person to know mine or my family's true identity and try to expose my daughter's biology to my rapist or his family. If my daughter desires to do that in the future, I want that decision to be wholly hers and not have another decision about her future to be made for her against her will. I'll suffice it to say that he is in prison for life WO parole, and I am not the only person he did this to. He also murdered at least one other victim. There are very few articles about this trial because it was a closed trial, and although none of the victims interviewed or are mentioned by name, they do use initial. There are also a slew of other charges he had brought against him as well. People want to know why or how I could have kept a baby knowing the possibility of the rapist being the father. And the answer is that even if I had known definitively that he was the father, my decision probably wouldn't have been different. She is as much a part of me biologically speaking as she is him. And after seeing her move around, I didn't desire an abortion, although it would have been nearly impossible for me to get one anyway where I live. Although she was conceived in violence, she was raised in love, understanding, and acceptance. She is much more mine and my husband than my rapist's. Also, he did contribute DNA to her, nothing else. He's had no influence or part in her life and likely never will. I know DNA doesn't mean anything in the sense of who she is, but that doesn't diminish the devastation and anger I feel knowing he is responsible for any part of her. I'm honestly not sure why my husband and I were so blindsided, but I feel like you can convince yourself of anything given the right circumstances. Initially, we did feel it was likely the rapist because of the year we went without conceiving, but when I got pregnant with my son pretty soon after my daughter, I convinced myself that not only was it a possibility, it was the only likely scenario. It's also not lost on me that the decision to keep her isn't something many people agree with, apparently, according to this post. But I know I made the right decision because my daughter is the most amazing girl and I couldn't imagine my life without her. My daughter is doing well and her relationship with myself and my husband hasn't changed at all. If anything, her relationship with my husband is much better. She makes an effort to spend more time with him and they have many shared interests. My daughter said she isn't upset I didn't tell her. She's upset she had to find out when she wasn't truly ready, and she was happy I was able to share such a vulnerable, horrible event with her. My son now knows the specifics and my youngest knows my daughter has a different dad, but not about my rape. People also seem to be concerned with her genetics and how it affects her future health. She already had neonatal testing for genetic disorders. I am not a carrier of any autosomal recessive disorders, and she has had genetic testing for autosomal dominant ones and was negative. She also has had genetic testing for several different forms of cancer because of my biological family history. Anything else couldn't affect her until adulthood, and they are all almost heavily influenced by lifestyle, so they wouldn't be a concern until she's much older. I'm not sure what else to say, so I'll just once again reiterate how thankful I am for all the support. Edited for clarity and context. Sorry, this was a rant. I didn't go into a lot of specifics like I did in my initial post. Here is the link. Also, I didn't word it very well, but we retested my daughter and husband because they never willingly gave my mother-in-law a sample and we didn't want to ask her how she got the DNA. Also, my husband and I have been in therapy on and off since this happened 18 years ago. And my kids have been in therapy since they were in middle school. I make them go 4 times a year and they can go more often if they desire. When this initially happened, I started having my daughter go weekly and now she goes every other day. Update 2. I'm so angry I don't know what to do now that I have confirmation. She is dead to me. Just confirmed my daughter isn't my husband's and I'm devastated. A couple of months ago, my mother-in-law unknowingly DNA tested our daughter because she didn't believe she was my husband's. To make a long story short, around the time of the conception of my daughter, I was raped during a home invasion. This was after several years of trying for a baby. I took EC at the hospital and was depressed and stressed after. Didn't realize I was pregnant until I was 15 weeks. My husband and I decided regardless we were going to keep the baby. After she was born, we decided we didn't want to find out. I felt like knowing absolutely she wasn't my husband would change how she was treated. My husband's family didn't know her paternity was in question, and they didn't know I was assaulted. Well, a couple months ago, my mother-in-law invited my husband and I out to dinner. She blindsides both of us by handing us envelopes with DNA results in them and basically says she always knew I was a liar and cheater and is trying to tell my husband to leave with her. My husband was devastated when he realized our daughter wasn't his. I've never seen him look more hurt. We had planned to tell my daughter when she was older that there was a question of her paternity and allow her to have DNA testing if she wished. But instead, I had to tell my 17-year-old the whole story of how I was assaulted and what her grandmother did. We didn't really know how my mother-in-law did the DNA test, so we decided to get another test done. I got confirmation this morning that my daughter and my husband have zero biological relationship. I'm so angry and pissed. We always knew this was a possibility, but I didn't think so a second it could happen. She looks so much like her siblings and me. Thank God she has no resemblance to the artist. I immediately made her start seeing her therapist more regularly, and she seems to be doing rather well despite everything, thankfully. Now let's see what the community has to say. Opinion number 1 says, even if the mother-in-law turned out to be right, she created a scenario for the maximum pain for her son, too, in finding out his wife betrayed him in a public place, from opening a random envelope, while his mom throws insults and tries to drag him out the door with no further discussion. Just something to consider before pulling a stunt like this. No wonder they can't forgive her. Opinion number 2 says, being pro-choice doesn't just mean you support abortion. It means you allow women to choose whether or not to carry a given pregnancy to term. I can't understand anyone bashing this woman for carrying her pregnancy to term. They wanted children enough to go through the IVF process, which isn't a walk in the park. Her and her partner figured out how to make it work for them. If you are pro-life, well, she did what she is supposed to do by that ethos. And if you are pro-choice, well, she made a decision she and her partner could live with and raised a wanted child that she is getting therapy as the child needs. Opinion number 3 says, mother-in-law literally only did this to cause drama. It's the only explanation. If she suspected OP of cheating, she could have pulled her son aside and asked about it like you said, but the effort she put in to secretly get the daughter's DNA, get it tested, get 2 copies of the results, and put them in unmarked envelopes, then invites her son and daughter-in-law out to dinner without telling them anything about what she had planned, just so she could make a big deal over handing them the envelopes and watching their reactions. She wanted to have a big gotcha moment where she could feel justified and morally superior about treating her granddaughter badly and not liking her son's wife. She wanted her son to be shocked and upset and have a big public confrontation and fight with his wife. She literally went to all this trouble just to cause drama. It's insane. How about you guys? What do you guys think about this whole situation, and what would your advice be for OP? Let's all discuss in the comments section below.